You're listening to the AmWritingFantasy Podcast. In today's publishing landscape, you can reach fans all over the world. Query letters are a thing of the past. You don't even need a literary agent. There is nothing standing in the way of making a living from writing. Join two best-selling authors who have self-published more than 20 books between them. Now, on to the show with your hosts, Autumn Burt and Jesper Schmidt.
Hello, I am Jesper.
And I'm Autumn.
This is episode 63 of the AmWritingFantasy Podcast, and we are going to discuss how much authors should read when writing, and I think this should become quite interesting, Autumn.
It is. This will be a fun one to debate because I know what they say, I know what I do, and I know what I want to do, so this will be fun to try to figure out which is the proper thing to be doing.
Yeah, if there is such a thing as a proper thing, because I think that's part of the conversation here as well, you know.
Very true.
But yeah, that's something we can discuss a bit here today.
Absolutely. But first, how was your week? I hear you had a very busy weekend. You hinted at. Yeah,
it almost feels like every weekend is busy at this time. I don't know why, but at least this past weekend was quite busy and also quite tiresome because I went to take my certificate so that I could also function as a linesman in soccer games.
Oh, that's exciting.
So that's like an additional, it's like an additional referee course that you need to take and you need to pass it. So it took all day. So you meet at 9 o'clock and you're done at 5. So it's like a normal work day.
Yeah.
But during that time, you also have, you sit for a couple of hours and doing, repetition of the theory because I'm already a referee, I know the theory already. So you do like repetition of it with the, linesman specific parts and go through all that once again. And then we went to an actual game where we then were linesmen, so each of us had like 10 minutes in each half where we were linesmen in a proper game to practice, which was quite nice. But the thing was that the wind was howling and it was raining and it was nasty. So
and
it was
February.
not, Yeah, and it was really cold, really raining, and you only had 10 minutes, and then the other guys who also took the certificate had their 10 minutes. So for like half an hour out of the 40 minutes in each half, you were just standing there in the freezing cold, raining, and it was not very pleasant.
That doesn't. I'm in Vermont, but you're in Denmark, so I think your latitude is further north, so I'm thinking, that just rain in February. And so how are you feeling? Do you have a cold, or you sound okay?
I feel okay. I mean,
okay, good.
we did get really wet and soaked because otherwise, also afterwards, you have to do. That's part of the certification that you had to pass a modified Cooper test. I don't know if you're familiar with those.
No,
but it's basically
I don't know that.
No, it's a Cooper test is like a run test that was I don't remember if it's like from the 60s or 70s, but it was developed for the US military. So I think normally in a Cooper test, if I remember correctly, you're running 12 minutes and it's basically like a max test. So you just run as far as you can in 12 minutes. Okay. And then it's used to, normally it's then being used to, that you build your training schedule off of that. So that you can, build up your stamina and become more fit and whatnot. That's how they use it in the military. But here we are doing it like a modified one. So instead we have to run 2 kilometers in 10 minutes.
Okay.
So that means that you have to run fairly fast, otherwise you're not going to make it. And we did this, of course, with the wind, right in our faces, like it was really strong headwind. So I was done for afterwards.
Oh man.
It was good. I passed everything, so
Yay,
now I
congratulations.
also have that certificate, so that was nice. But other than that, then I must say, when I got home Friday evening, I was very, very tired. So
I
so
would
I was
imagine
pleased, to
so.
be honest, that this morning or this week the kids are off school for the winter holidays. So I was actually quite pleased about that, because that meant that I could sleep in this morning, which was quite nice, instead of doing an early school run.
Oh,
So
that's good.
that's good.
That's good. Then hopefully they slept in and didn't like decide to get up at the crack of dawn and get into things.
Now, the kids are a bit older now, so they don't get up late, but they don't get up early either. So it's like this 8 o'clock, something like that, 7:30, something like that. So it's okay. It's enough that I can sleep in as well. So
Okay.
so that's good. So, but we're planning to take them to the swim stadium this Friday. So. So and on Sunday as well, my youngest has he's attending a soccer tournament that I have to go with him for on this coming weekend. So it's like, next weekend is busy as well.
Yeah, it sounds like you definitely are running around. But hey, you're parents, and plus you have other things you're working on with the soccer, and so that will keep you busy.
Yeah. But I think last time when we recorded, you were talking about doing the renovation and whatnot. So you've probably been pretty busy too.
Oh yeah, just trying to. I think if I ever have to pick up a pickaxe again, I hope it's not to be lobbing at frozen ground and some big boulders. And we also had some concrete posts that were supporting the roof for the overhang, where we're building a little room below it. And
right.
I just, as a writer, as anyone who likes to work with her, actually anyone, no one wants to be sore, but my elbows and my wrists and my hands, I feel this a lot. So I'm tired, but hey, we're up to the point. I have the floor joist in, it's level. I think I'm done with the frozen ground and the pickaxing. And I have just one more sheet of floorboard plywood to put down, and then literally the subfloor is done, and I can just worry about the walls. And after frozen floor, February frozen outside, frozen groundwork, I'm ready for just wood. But we have a storm coming tomorrow, and then it's going to be nice for a little while. So we just have to cover up our lumber and stuff, because we don't need it coated in ice. And then hopefully we'll get the walls done and the sheeting done. So next week it's supposed to be really crappy and icy and rainy and like February winter kind of stuff. But if we can at least have the outside sheeting on and the walls up, then who cares? We can worry about siding it when the weather's half decent. We can just work inside at that point. So it's very close, very exciting.
It almost sounds actually like that you have it colder than we do here, to be honest.
I don't know. We'll have
you have
to compare.
Snow and ice, because we don't have that.
Oh yeah, no, we have snow and ice. We had the temperature the other day was 0 degrees when we woke up, and that's Fahrenheit.
That's colder than here.
Yeah, so that was Fahrenheit. It's just about freezing every day. Usually, like in the afternoons, it'll go above freezing, but most of all night and most mornings and evenings are below freezing. So it's kind of cold.
Yeah, sounds like it. Well, once we get into talking about the temperature and the weather, maybe it's time to move on.
Time to move on.
A week on the internet with the AmWritingFantasy Podcast.
So we have a lot of new joiners on Patreon. I just wanted to give each of them a shout out here. So we have Marina Handwerk, something like that. Nina Jensen, Brian, Jacob Pitts, and a fellow Dane. Do you want to try to pronounce her name, Autumn?
No, I'm not even. I don't want you to feel insulted. I've already seen you writing notes to each other in Danish, so I just no, that's your side. You're good. I trust your pronunciation.
So that was Christina Frøk here.
Oh, very nice.
That
okay,
sound?
that's That's one I'm going to have to work on. That's really good. So how do you say hello in Danish, though? I want to know that one.
Well, you just say hi.
Hi? You don't have another
It's
word?
almost like hey, almost like English, but you just say hi.
Hi? Okay.
Yeah.
It's not like French with bonjour or anything. All right. So I can say hi?
No.
And,
Exactly.
Good. Excellent. Well, good.
It's quite easy.
We should do a word every single week. I'll eventually catch on.
Oh, maybe. But at least I wanted to, on behalf of both myself and Autumn, of course, to say thank you so much for the support that you're offering to the Writing Fantasy podcast. It's this kind of support that helps us keep the lights on when it comes to this podcast. So please know that your pledge really makes a difference, and it means a lot to us.
It does. It's wonderful to be able to help and meet other people a lot more personally than we would in just like the Facebook group and the support. Yeah, it keeps us going here, which is really important.
Yeah, we offer a lot of rewards to those who join us. So I could also mention that just last week, at the point of this episode going out, we had the monthly Q&A session for all those who support us at the Adult Dragon tier, because you gotta name your tier something with dragons, right?
Absolutely. All of ours are dragon tiers, and yeah, of course, we're fantasy authors. Of course, we have dragons in there.
Exactly, yeah. So if you want to see what rewards we're offering, check the link in the show notes and head on over to Patreon and consider to join the club and become one of our backers over there.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, not only do you get into the podcast early, but to me, sometimes it's the weekly. I mean, we're doing like weekly writing tips and blogs and answering questions over there. So there's it would be joining now. There's over a year's worth of backlog of blog posts just to access that have tons of tips. So yeah, every day it's getting more and more.
Yeah, and we also try to post a bit kind of like publishing, marketing, industry information / tips once a week as well. So only the Patreon supporters are getting those as well. So this is actually stuff that we're not posting elsewhere. So that might be good to get into that if you're interested.
Absolutely. Though I don't want to forget, I still absolutely love how the Writing Fantasy Facebook group is growing so fast by leaps and bounds, and how much conversation is going on. I just looked at like one of the top ones just from yesterday. Someone asked, like, how do you choose weapons for characters? Guess how many comments are on that one already?
Ooh, 20?
Oh, you're so low.
Oh, really?
Yeah. 41 comments on that one, and it's just they're still typing people talking about how they choose their character weapons, and it's a lot of fun. So it's really actually seeing all the different ways, especially the different types. So we have fantasy from medieval to someone mentioning their space opera, and they mentioned something about a dinosaur. So they're just fun to read. So that's another one that if you don't want to join, if you can't join us on Patreon right now, come over at least to the Writing Fantasy Facebook group, because it's just fun.
Yeah, it is, and I think I don't remember if we talked about this on a past podcast episode or if it had just been conversations between you and me, Autumn. But we have talked about in the past, at least, that it feels like with Facebook groups that you sort of need to reach some sort of critical mass, and once you get that far, then the interaction starts to flow more, because there are just enough people that you will always get responses, and we've certainly passed that actually quite a while back, I think. But it's amazing. I mean, every day I'm either myself or Luke, and sometimes you, Autumn, are letting in more people. It's like every day there's join requests, and every day there's new posts from people asking for help or advice, and people pitching in. So I think that's absolutely excellent, and it's a really nice free resource. So whether you're sort of viewing Facebook the same way that I do and you don't quite like Facebook, this one is just enough that I'm going to go on Facebook anyway.
Yes, I agree. It's definitely become that kind of group, which is awesome.
And on to today's topic.
So how much should you read when writing? I mean,
reading and writing. This is a tough one.
Is something that is, yeah, but also because there's so many opinions on this one.
There are. So many people.
I don't know. Maybe for a start, Autumn, before we even get started on this, maybe we should just point out that whatever we say from this point and onwards is just our opinions. There is nothing right or wrong in this episode. We're just sharing what we think, and you can feel absolutely free to disagree with us. That's fine. We have no problems with that. So we can only just say what we feel like. And I think this is going to be that kind of episode.
Yes, I think so. And you can happily comment, debate, criticize, though be kind in the comments. That's what they're there for. So this will be a fun one to maybe be a conversation with of, how much do you think? Are we right? Are we wrong? What do you think of the advice that's out there? And I think that might be also a really good place to start is what you've heard. What do they tell writers? How much you should read while writing is always a good place to start.
Yeah, it is for sure. I also actually found a 2014 Time magazine article about how much Americans read. So we can just cycle back to that as well, and I can tell you what people. Well, this is self-assessment stuff. So it's just what people believe themselves. So it's not like a scientific study as such, but it's still a bit interesting. But we can just cycle back to that and I think. The elephant in the room. Maybe I can start with that. At least the elephant that I see.
Acknowledge that, yeah.
Because there is this Stephen King quote out there, and I think this one influences quite a lot about how people believe, think, view the point about how much you should be reading when you're writing. And the quote goes like this. So, quote, "If you want to be a writer, you must do two things: read a lot and write a lot." Unquote.
All right.
So that's what Stephen King said, right?
So it doesn't tell you have to. It's not like write every day. It doesn't say read every day. It just says read a lot.
Read a lot and write a lot.
Yeah, that's right.
Which, of course, I'm not going to disagree with any of that. I mean, I think that is true. But I mean, the man has sold more than 350 million copies of his work, right? And I also looked up, according to Forbes, he earns approximately $40 million per year, right?
Wow.
So I'm not going to argue with that guy.
No. That'd be like arguing. If Neil Gaiman told me I had to read every day, I'd probably just go and do it. So.
Well, yeah, but this is exactly what I wanted to debate a bit here, right? Because I think this is part of the problem. Because the guy Stephen King, and because he has the name he has, and because he's like the multi-award winning, highly successful author that everybody wants to be, when he says something, it is taking as gospel.
Yes.
And that is fair enough, and I understand why. So I'm not sort of putting people down for doing that at all. I fully understand the logic behind, but I do have some issues when what he said there about read a lot comes off as if now this is a requirement. If you want to be something like a successful, not even like Stephen King, because I think that's the lightning in the bottle conversation again, right? But if you want to be successful, at least, then if you aren't reading a lot, you will never become a good writer. And I think, to be honest, that this is how that statement is often understood. Or that quote that I mentioned before.
Yeah, that sort of definitely makes sense.
And I don't like that.
I like to question everything. So I guess it probably wouldn't hit me that way, but there definitely would have been a time where in my life where I would have tried to juggle more balls than I really should possibly be responsible for, just because everyone said this, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. It's probably why I say why at this point. But I think that might be a key component is why should you read when you're a writer? And that is important, and maybe what you should read when you're a writer, because there's also a difference there. And so there's a lot of wiggle room on this question. There's a lot of things to unpack and try to figure out when they say you should read if you want to be a writer. So what should you be reading? Should you be reading your genre? Should you be reading books on how to write? Should you just be reading the news? It doesn't say what. I read a lot of news stories every day. BBC is like, my go-to if I have a 5-second break to see what's going on in the world.
Right. But that's not fiction, though.
It is not,
but I guess this is part of the conversation here.
It does. It does. It's just, okay, so what are you supposed to be reading? Should it only be about writing, or should it be in your genre?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, I do think that reading is important. And I tried to think before we went to record this. I was trying to think of things that, what are the benefits of reading from a writer's perspective, and I tried to think of some stuff, and I came up with 4 things, to be honest.
Oh, excellent!
And one of them is also answering the question you just raised about what it is that you should be reading.
Oh, good.
So maybe I can go over them here, and then you can see if you have some more to pitch in, or maybe you disagree with some of them, and then you can share your thoughts.
We never disagree, so this will be fun. We'll see if we can come up with something.
Or maybe I shouldn't call it problem, but it always ends up so that we agree on everything. So it doesn't become very like heated debates, these podcast episodes.
I'll have to play devil's advocate just for the sake of it. All right.
Yeah. All right. So number 1, I put down that the more you read, the more words and sentence structures that you will gain exposure to. So this will inform and help you in your own writing, and I think that is true.
That's very true.
Because when you see other authors writing, and now we're talking fiction here, of course, because then you're getting a sense of how do they use the words, but also the sentence structures, and how are they. Especially with fantasy, for example, how are they doing the world building elements? How are they sharing things about the world inside the narrative without info dumps, like we talked about in past episodes, and all that good stuff? That's something you do get a feeling for from reading. So and it sort of broadens your understanding of how to write. So I think that's important.
Yes, I agree. Of course. But I think it's also important, the quality of what you're reading, because you're talking about, learning. And I've seen, sometimes if you're not reading something that is well written, you might be learning the wrong things. And I have definitely seen that at a few times, that people are not reading, maybe it's more lightweight. It's not, the high end, the J.K. Rowling's or the George R.R. Martin, really seeing some really fantastic writing. I did read a really nice article from someone once who said, when you're reading something and it really just moves you or takes you by surprise, or you just, it has an impact on you, that's when you should stop and really analyze it and look at it and see why. How did the author do this? That's a really great way of looking at writing. And again, if I've read stories where the dialogue was literally wee and other things like that, and that's probably not the inspiration and that I want to be unpacking. So you got to watch the quality of what you're reading.
But isn't that highly sort of subjective? I mean, what if I like to read something where the dialogue is wee, and that's what I like, and I want to write like that? Well, that's fine, right?
That is fine. If that's also what you want to write, I guess read something that is from an author who will inspire you. So if you go for someone who's writing that style you love and that you think is really an excellent writer and is writing things that you like, and that'll help inspire you and teach you a lot about the genre and how to write whatever it is about their writing that you like, whether it's the characters or the world or just the sentence structure, like you said.
Yeah, and it also on the flip side, I would say, for example, it's probably a year ago, but I read Brandon Sanderson's Way of Kings, right. I think. Sorry, I think it's Way of Kings, not King, but never mind. But I read that I think about a year ago. And well, I think most of us, or most of our listeners here, know Brandon Sanderson is a pretty big name within fantasy authors, within the community of fantasy authors. But honestly, I didn't like those books.
I think that's fair.
And somebody will kill me now, but honestly, I didn't.
We will be trolled because you did not like a Brandon Sanderson story.
Probably. Yes.
Yes.
I mean, but nevertheless, I still got something out of it. I was certainly inspired with. I mean, the world building stuff. I mean, hands down, he does an excellent job at world building. And so you can still pick up things about, for example, how he's again sharing the world details without doing infodumps, and not because he does not do infodumps. It's all part of the story, which is really nice. So you can still pick up information like that, even though that the story itself I didn't really care much for.
That's cool.
I didn't care much for the character either. But there are still things you can pick up from reading other people's books. I like this one element, but the rest I don't like. So you just ignore the rest and you pick up the elements that you do like, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's fine.
I mean, I've still never actually finished Game of Thrones because the pacing sometimes was too slow, and I really could not get used to the fact that all the characters I cared about died. But at least now that I've watched the show, maybe I'll know which ones. Yeah, at least now that I've watched the show, I can at least see which ones. I know which ones will make it to the end, so I'll try to focus on those. But his writing, it's the language and what it evokes and how he uses the different senses. There's a couple paragraphs and pages of his writing that I keep as inspiration when I'm feeling stuck and like my writing's flat. I go read those and I'm like, right, this is what I'm trying to do. And so, even though I've never finished the whole series, I've finished enough of it to know this is stellar. If I could do this, I'd be so thrilled.
Right. Okay, so that was only number 1.
Okay, let's go for 2.
Yeah, so I'll do 2 and 3 here in quick succession because they're just short points. And then number 4 I'll get into answering the question you asked before about what you should be reading. So number 2 is, when you're reading, you are forced to block all kinds of other stuff out, and you're forced to focus. And so it helps to improve your concentration, which I think is a good skill to have as a writer. So that's just a quick one there. And number 3 is in prolongation of the learning about words and sentence structures, but that's more like the fundamentals of story structure. You also get a better understanding about how different authors are structuring their stories by reading a lot of books. So again, there will be some stuff you like and some stuff you don't like, and that's fine. And you pick and choose what you want to sort of bring forward to inform your own writing, and what you want to ignore. That's absolutely fine. But reading a lot of different stories, it does give you different perspective on how a story can be structured and what, at least from your point of view, works and what doesn't work.
Yes, both are very good points. I like the idea. I hadn't been considering it, but with focus, I think that's a really important, that there's so much going on in the world that it's probably a good thing to learn to just get lost in something. And then hopefully you can do the same thing in your book. And I have to admit, as a writer, we never experience our own stories with that first level of discovery. Not the complete thing. It's always, we're discovering lots about our story as we write, but we're never going to experience as a reader. So it's also really fun to read, just to remember what it's like to be led along. And so we can think about how we're doing that for the people reading our stories.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, should I get into my perspective on the question you asked then?
Yes, because I think I'm saving up one of the reasons. I think it's going to be related to something I'm thinking of. So let's go for it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so in terms of what should you be reading, in my opinion, it's one of the typical answers where it depends a bit. But if you're not well-versed within or well-read within the genre that you're writing already, then you have to write within the genre.
Yes.
Because the thing is that, did I say right? I meant read. You have to read within the genre, yeah. Because the thing is that each genre has its own kind of tropes within them. And I'm not trying to start saying here now that you need to copy tropes and you need to follow them, but if you don't have a sense of what they are and also how they do inform reader expectations of the stories, then your book are not going to resonate with that audience. So it's not about copying tropes, but it is about touching upon the tropes.
Oh yeah.
So that you are at least delivering what readers of that particular genre is expecting. And then, of course, the way that you deliver it, you have to be creative and try to find new ways, but still touching upon those particular tropes for the genre. So that's a reason why I think you have to read within the same genre as you're writing. If you are really well versed within your genre already and you understand all of it already, I don't know, maybe, for example, if you would like to write a fantasy story that has some thriller elements in it, maybe it could be worth reading a bit of thriller stories just to see how those stories are working and how the authors are going about that, to, give you a bit of an outside perspective almost, if you can call it that. But for the majority, I will probably say that you have to read within the genre and stay, for the most part, just stay there.
Yeah, and I think
I don't know what you think.
Yeah, well, I think there's a few reasons to. I guess it doesn't. I like variety, so I think it's sometimes fun to just read in your genre or read what you're writing in the genre you're writing. But sometimes it is fun to just go pick up a murder mystery and see how they do some layering in of clues, and you can learn so much about that. And so it's really fun to kind of go for really good stories. But I do think it's really important to do that because you learn not only what we've been talking about, but the current trends. I think if I just recently read an Anne McCaffrey, when the first book I ever picked up that was a fantasy story, and is the reason I fell in love with fantasy. And I read it again, and I haven't actually finished my review for it on Goodreads because this is the most pivotal story of my entire life. And reading it now as an adult in 2020 versus, a kid in 1980, where the sexism, it's more omniscient, just all the writing trends that have changed. How this woman, her boyfriend / lover treats her. Oh my gosh, if that happened today. But at the time it was fine. But reading it now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'd never let my kid read this. If I would not want another young child to think it's okay to be shaken and be almost afraid of the person who is supposed to be her partner. Holy crap. No. So I think it's important. Go read, but, try to read what's contemporary because you'll be surprised at the change in nuances. Characters, I remember the 80s, it was a lot about, you are born destined, the big glowy signs, and you shall go and be this. And nowadays it's like, I'm sorry, you're like the poor farm boy. You're going to have to earn this through some horrible trials. And if you're lucky, you will come out alive and be something better. It's a lot different. So if you're going to pick up something, it's to pick up those sorts of things. What are the trends? How are characters being developed? Read the comments to see what readers like about the story, what they hated about the story. And it's fascinating. Every book I read now has become like a scientific study of what do I like? What did other readers like? What do people say about it? Because it's good to find the trends, and you're always allowed to have your own views and opinions. But again, if you're writing for a mass audience, it's also interesting to see if you agree or disagree with what other people found. It's really fun. And even little things, like I realized I like to write dystopian, but almost all dystopian is written in first person. And I don't know why, it's like nails on a chalkboard to me. I don't really like reading or writing first person. So it's one reason I stay away. I have a little bit in the genre, but it's also partially why I stay away from it, because third person is not that common and readers are not they're okay with it. Some of them mention, it's okay, but it's not what they're looking for. And those are important things you only know by being curious and going in there and reading or picking up at least a whole bunch of the free downloads and at least going through them a little bit to get the trends.
Yeah, what you said just reminded me, because quite recently I finished reading the first book in the Dragonland series with my sons. Yeah. And I was so afraid of going back to read that because of exactly what you were mentioning there, right? I was so afraid that this wonderful memory of Dragonlance was the one that put me on the track of fantasy back when I was a child, and I have so fond memories of that series. It's just like the best thing I ever read, and then I was like, oh my god! I mean, I'm so afraid now. I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to start reading, and I'm going to be like, what is this? You know, I was so concerned about it.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, and I was so concerned about having my fond memory completely spoiled.
Yeah,
but to be honest, it was okay. It was not as good as I remember it though. But it's okay. I mean, Raistlin is still cool. Okay, so that's good.
There's definitely.
But I mentioned that 2014 Time Magazine article before.
Yeah,
maybe I should just circle back to that for a second.
Let's circle back what it said.
Yeah, so again, it was people's own estimation on how much they read. So there's no science involved here, right? But it's so it said that Americans read 19 minutes a day on average.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, so this is 2014, so mind you, it's six years old, right?
Yeah.
But
so it's
younger
now
Americans,
like 9 minutes a day.
Younger Americans aged between 25 and 34 reads just 4 minutes a day.
Wow.
And those over 75 reads upwards of 1 hour each day.
Wow.
So and I'm pretty sure that in terms of the younger demographics there, it could even be less than 4 minutes nowadays. Yeah. But I don't know. How much do you read on average a day, Autumn?
I would say, because again, most of my reading right now is probably news stories and things like that. But I would say maybe I get in an hour, but maybe I'm overestimating, half an hour to an hour. And I would like that to be fiction. And I do like, my problem is I try not to read while I'm writing, because I'm task oriented, and once I get involved in a novel, I just want to read. I'm like addicted to reading. It's my biggest addiction.
Right. Okay.
So I do not usually read while I'm writing, because otherwise I'll just read. But I do other types, readings, little short stories and stuff. So what do you think you read?
Well, certainly less than I would like to. I don't have time during days and whatnot to read. So the time when I read is when I go to bed in the evening before I need to sleep. So then I like to take my Kindle and read a bit before going to sleep. But it happens too often compared to what I would like, that I'm too tired when I get to bed. So I almost cannot read. So I just fall asleep instead. Okay. So I don't know. On average, maybe like... I probably pretty much aligned with that article there. Maybe 15, 20 minutes.
Okay.
Something like that, which is far less than I want to. I would really like to read more, but I feel it really difficult to find the necessary time to do so, but also because when you have been really busy all day, when I get to bed, I'm tired.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. And I think that's...
But maybe...
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. No, well, I was just about to say, but maybe this is also why the Stephen King quote there rubs me a bit the wrong way, because it's I mean, not the quote itself, but more like the way that I think some people understand the quote. Because I don't know what exactly he meant by it when he said read a lot. I don't know if maybe somebody can dig out an article where he elaborated on it. And I did read Stephen King's On Writing, that book he wrote. I did read that, but that's like a couple of years ago, so I can't quite remember if he elaborated on it in there. But maybe he means that you have to read a lot every day, or maybe he just means that you read as much as you can. I'm not sure, but at least I just feel like it's important to be mindful that you don't end up dedicating so much time to reading that it basically ends up taking time away from writing.
Exactly.
Because we're not going to be authors unless we write.
Exactly. That's why I try to write a book and then read a book and then write a book and read a book. Because if I do it any other way, it screws up everything. And I would just be reading. But I do think it's important. And I mean, I also think it comes from... like I mentioned, trends and all those things you can only get by reading current stories, things that are out now. But before I became a writer, I mean, how many fantasy books did I think? I used to polish off a book in 2 or 3 days. And so if I estimated from the time I really started reading fantasy in 7th grade to when I started writing and slowed down on my reading activities, that's a lot of books. I mean, it has to count somewhere. I got all of that knowledge stored inside of me somewhere, even though sometimes it's, not how I'd want to be writing now, but at least I can analyze that and I still get something from it because it's part of why I love the genre and why I became a writer.
Yeah, don't you think that sometimes reading can end up for some people to be like a procrastination tool?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like the excuse that, I need to read some stuff, so I don't have time to write today or something. I don't know.
The writing should definitely come first, and it's one of the hard parts of being an author. I see some authors on Goodreads, and they have like 20 some books they want to read. I'm like, damn, no, it's been a long time since I read 20 books in a year or set myself that kind of goal.
I've never read 20 books in a year.
I used to read 20 books in a month. Are you kidding?
Well, that's amazing. I mean, my wife always makes fun of me because whenever I start reading a new book, it takes me like 4 or 5 months before I'm done with it. And in the meantime, she's read like 10 books before I get done with one.
That does make it harder when you're a slower reader, but it's still, again, it becomes an addiction for me, so I have to stay away from it. I want to be writing. I want to be creating my own stories. And it's funny because I think, too, if you are reading and writing at the same time, there's definitely a trend where you kind of take on some of the aspects of what you've been reading, and you might change your tone, which is also, like, if you're in the middle of the trilogy, the last thing you want to do is totally change up your tone just because you were influenced by someone. So those are all kind of the caveats. You have to be careful about what you're reading, because if you screw things up, you can screw up some big things.
Yeah, but don't you think that that's more like if you're in your really early stages of writing? I mean, once you've written enough, you're not going to change your style just because you're reading something, I would say, but maybe
I think it's sometimes
differently.
A subconscious change, because I've found myself using words that I would not normally, or just the pacing's a little different. I can see things being influenced occasionally by what I am reading, so I do watch that. If it's not, I don't want to be reading something post-apocalyptic and horror when I'm also writing epic fantasy that's all noble right, because I think, you end up with darker turns and your characters are a little more melodramatic, and you're like, no, that's not what I'm aiming for. It's like changing your entire mood. I'm very much affected by what I'm reading.
Oh, okay.
Again, that's why I limit myself. It's like being on a diet. I just want to pick up a book, but I can't.
No, that's quite interesting, actually, because I think my mind sort of just compartmentalizing everything. So it doesn't matter what I read or watch. I mean, of course, you're always going to get somewhat of an influence for whatever you're reading or watching on Netflix or what. I mean, that's unavoidable.
Right.
But I don't think that it really influences the way that I'm telling the story, no matter what I'm watching. So I don't really think about that much. I just watch or read whatever I want.
It might be you're much more of a plotter, and I don't know if that has something to do with it. Where I'm more of a pantser, so I'm more of a hybrid. I straddle the line between the two. So it could be that. So I have a lot more wiggle room where things get influenced more than maybe sometimes I'm meaning for it to happen.
All right. Yeah. But I don't know, maybe if it's possible even to derive some sort of conclusion out of all this talking around, but I don't know. I'm sort of thinking that I think we are both saying that if you should not like spend years reading other people's fiction if it prevents you from doing any writing on your own, at least I think that, writing skills doesn't magically appear just because you are reading. No. You have to be writing, and that should be your priority. So at least in my view, if you are so busy in your day-to-day life, then prioritize your writing. And then if you can get in like maybe the 10 minutes of reading before you fall asleep like me, then that's it.
I think that sounds good.
Of course, I'm tooting my own horn here, I know.
Oh, that's all right. I think, I tried to do it, depending on how long a chapter was, just one chapter is good. And then, then the breaks come off when I start getting close to the climax. But reading is important. But yes, you don't even know the questions of what to look for and the things to break down to see why you like this writing or why you don't like that writing until you've been writing. So reading should definitely come secondary. Hopefully you've read books that inspired you to become a writer. So you have that backlog, you have that firm foundation. Write first and then read, and it's amazing. It's just like, going to the movies with an author. You want to strangle people because they're constantly pointing out the clues and the plots, and we're horrible. But it's true. We all do it.
Yeah, that's my wife next to me in the couch when we're watching something. She hates that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it just comes to us now. Once you start doing it, you just can't turn it off. It's so hard to sit there in silence.
No, the problem is also we see the foreshadowing, we see the plot holes miles away, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. So, but you don't know that until you're writing and you're doing it yourself, and then you struggle with something, and then you read it, someone else do it, and you're like, oh, that's perfect, and you remember it from that on. So I agree. I think that's our take-home message. Write first. You're already a reader, but just a little bit of spice.
Perfect. So in episode 60, we shared the cost of editing, but how much does it cost to produce a novel when taking cover design and everything else into account? That's the topic for next Monday.
If you like what you just heard, there's a few things you can do to support the Writing Fantasy Podcast. Please tell a fellow author about the show and visit us at Apple Podcast and leave a rating and review. You can also join Autumn and Jesper on patreon.com/AmWritingFantasy. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get awesome rewards and keep the Writing Fantasy Podcast going. Stay safe out there and see you next Monday.